Is ASUS new G14 the best laptop that you could buy right now? Honestly, after spending the last week with this thing in Taiwan and playing around with it a little bit more, I can at least say that this is the best gaming laptop that I've personally used. So I'll run you down the specs that are in my unit first, talk about the games that I play, the performance that I get, and some of the use cases that I've had for this while I was away, and most importantly, how it actually holds up. Now, the model that I have here is using AMD's Ryzen AI9 HX370 processor. I absolutely hate this naming scheme, but it's a 12-core, 24-thread chip, and it's incredibly fast with a boost of over 5 gigahertz. I'm also running the RTX 5070 Ti. Now, inside this chassis, it can turbo up to 110 watts, which is really impressive considering like how thin and light the G14 is compared to other gaming laptops. And it does also have 12 gigs of VRAM. And the spec that I have also has a 1TB SSD and 32 gigs of RAM. I think as spec, this is a pretty impressive laptop. The 5070 Ti gives you that good middle ground where you're not spending too much more to get a marginal performance increase, especially considering there are very real thermal constraints here. And like I said, I'll talk about performance in a minute, but I do have even more thoughts as to why this is actually a good spec to choose. Before we go further though, I just want to say thank you so much for the support. A like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. We are almost at 60,000 subscribers, which is just insane, and I really can't thank you all enough. Anyways, I want to quickly touch on build quality though, because this is an expensive device, and I really feel like at this price point, it needs to hold up and actually feel like it is one. And it definitely does. Like, it's a mostly aluminum chassis. It has a nice, almost matte finish feel to it. And it's about 1.5 kilograms, which is enough to feel sturdy and not cheap, but also not enough to be a burden in your backpack if you're traveling with it. Like I said, I just came back from Taiwan with this thing. I had it in my backpack the entire time. We went hiking up the mountains, we roamed around Taipei, and not once did I really feel like this thing was too much to carry. Maybe something like ASUS's Scar 16 would probably dislocate my shoulder, but with the G14, I'm fine. Like, it's actually not a problem at all. I also like the keyboard on this thing. It's got really nice travel. The keys have a nice finish. There's not much deck flex, and it did take me a little bit to get up to speed on it, but once I did, I have no complaints. Typing on it feels really intentional. I don't make very many mistakes if I do, and especially for gaming, it doesn't feel exhausting or cramped, especially after a long period of time. Now, I think the best part about this laptop, aside from like the performance, of course I went to sleep. Thank God for Windows Hello. I think the best thing, hands down, is the display. It has a beautiful 14-inch 3K OLED panel. And now they call this the ROG Nebula display, so it's a glossy panel with a 0.2 millisecond response time. And it has all the certifications like G-Sync, Adaptive Sync. It's Pantone validated. It has Dolby Vision HDR. And yeah, there's quite a bit more, but let's not get into like all the semantics here. The biggest thing for me though is that this display is covering 100% of the DCI-P3 color gamut. So aside from it looking good, while I was away, I was actually able to edit photos on it. It's nice knowing that what I was seeing on the laptop would translate to whatever device it's being viewed on when I was ready to export my photos. Granted, it's not like the brightest display ever. I believe it's only around 500 nits or so, but it actually didn't really translate at all to my real world experience with it. I found that when I was outside using this laptop, it was very viewable. And granted, this is in Taiwan where the sun was glaring and I got sunburnt in like 3 seconds of being outside. Now, I will say it would have been nice when editing photos to actually have a full-sized SD card slot. Come on, ASUS, please. But I understand that not everyone needs an SD card slot, and that's okay. Though the G14 does have a solid selection of ports. Like, it has a 3.5mm combo audio jack, an HDMI 2.1. There's 2 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports. This is becoming a lot. These names are ridiculous, but those can do up to 10 gigabits a second. And there's also a USB 3 Gen 2 Type C port, which can do DisplayPort, power delivery, and so on. Now, there's also another Type C port, but this one is USB 4, so technically Thunderbolt 4. They can't call it Thunderbolt on this one because this is not an Intel machine. And yeah, it doesn't have a full-sized SD card slot, but it does have a micro SD card slot, which is fine. Now, there's also this, which is the proprietary connector for the included 200-watt power brick. I will say, this can be quite a lot to carry around, I'm not gonna lie. But that being said, when I was on my trip, I didn't actually bring this around. I was just using a Type C brick, and I had a 90-watt cable. I believe this thing can do 60 watts over USB-C unless you buy ASUS's certified power adapter, which is a USB-C brick. So as long as like you're not doing anything intensive like playing games or whatever, you're not gonna discharge it really. And you can get away with just using a power adapter when you're on the go, say you're doing like school and whatnot. Okay, now remember when I said that this thing might actually just be the better spec of the G14? So here in Canada, the 5080 version just gets a bump from the 5070 Ti to the 5080. So this is the same laptop, just a different GPU. But the RTX 5080 requires much more power. And not only will you actually hear your fans spin up quicker, but they might get louder. And honestly, because of thermal limitations, you might not even be seeing the 5080's full potential inside of the laptop. Not to mention the 5080 could throttle a little bit quicker, which does leave the performance between these two being a lot more similar than you might actually think. And I will actually leave a video down below so that you have more to go off of than just my words, since I haven't actually used the 5080 version, but there is a really good detailed breakdown that I'll post down there. Okay, let's get into gaming quick because I feel like this is something that everyone actually cares about when it comes to these laptops. So I play PUBG, Fortnite, Call of Duty. I mess around with Assassin's Creed here and there recently, and I tried out the new Oblivion remastered. Honestly, the G14 handles everything pretty well. I mean, this thing isn't cheap, so I'd expect it to, but there are a couple of things that I want to talk about that could make the experience even better. So for something like Fortnite, for example, I was running everything at high settings, and I'm averaging around 140 to 160 FPS during gameplay, and it's extremely smooth. There's no stuttering, there's no issues with hitching, and it's all very controlled, and that's what you'd want out of a competitive game like a first-person shooter. It looks very nice running on the G14 with that OLED display, and yeah, sure, you could turn down the settings and get more frames, but the display is only 120 Hz anyways. Now, sure, maybe if you're playing something like Counter-Strike or Valorant, you'd want more frames because you want to lower your input latency. That's fine, but that is also just possible on here. I feel like there's a lot of headroom when it comes to these competitive esports titles. PUBG, also a similar situation. High settings, I was getting around 120 to 150 frames per second. Now, this is a game that almost always stutters for me no matter what hardware I'm playing it on, but I was actually quite surprised on how the G14 was handling it. Like, for the most part, it felt incredibly smooth, which is nice for a broken game. This is definitely something that I could actually sit down and play with and have a genuinely good time with. So it's nice to see the games that I actually enjoy running fine on this laptop. Now, Black Ops 6, for example, could honestly be a hit or miss on a lot of devices. Even on my desktop, sometimes I have issues, but on the G14, I'm around a solid 120 frames per second. Yet again, I could go even further if I decided to use DLSS or frame gen, which I will actually talk about in a second. But yeah, overall, despite me enjoying shooters, which can be a little more demanding since you want as much FPS as possible, the G14 has actually been enjoyable for me, and so far I'm just a pretty big fan of the gaming experience that I'm getting on this laptop. Now, Assassin's Creed Shadows, for example, is a game that I was hovering around 60 FPS with cranked settings. Don't get me wrong, that's not bad at all for a story game, and it's definitely something that, yeah, I would take a controller, sit back and just enjoy and shut up. But where it sort of takes a turn is with DLSS 4, thanks to the 50 series GPU inside. You immediately put less of a load on the GPU, it decreases your temperatures, your power requirements, and you gain a lot more in the way of performance. Now, I'm not someone who notices a ton of artifacting or weird things happening because of like DLSS, for example, but it's not something that I'd use for multiplayer or competitive titles. It is just nice to be able to get, additional frame rate out of a game that you're playing. And for me, it's perfect for single player campaign games, especially open world titles like Assassin's Creed. That's the same thing with Oblivion. The game ran poorly on Ultra, but turning on frame gen, I got a huge increase in performance. And for a demanding game to be played on a thin and light like this, with this resolution and quality, it was just nice to see. And again, this kind of comes back to that whole 5070 Ti versus 5080 argument anyway. In a lot of these titles, I do find that I would be using frame gen or DLSS. So for me, it doesn't really make sense to actually own the 5080 version because I'm not really going to be utilizing the extra performance of that GPU. I will say I don't speak for everyone. If you have a different use case with your laptop, if you're using it for heavy video editing, or you need more VRAM, for example, the 5080 is a good shout on the G16 and the G14. Now, I'm going to be releasing a video soon where I show a lot more of my experience on the G14. It is like a vlog where I basically just took this thing for a week in Taiwan, used it, and just saw how this thing actually worked in my day-to-day, which I think will be an interesting video for sure. So it's definitely something that's worth subscribing for if you want to hear more about this specific laptop. This video is very surface level on purpose. I want to spend more time with this device and actually come to like a really big conclusion on whether this thing as a whole is worth it, what you can actually expect, and I do want to break down things like battery life, more importantly, in a video in the future. There was recently a driver update which improved the performance by like 10 to 15% on the 50 series laptops. So I just want to make sure everything is just like as smoothed over as it can be to actually tell you whether or not this investment is going to be worth it for you, considering you're not just gonna buy this, use it for a couple of months, and then throw it away and get another one. So while I will be releasing a video that does talk more about this thing kind of as a whole, there are a couple of things that I've noticed right out of the gate and a couple of things that I do appreciate. So the speakers, they're fantastic. They sound really good, they're very loud, and they are actually quite immersive, and they could do a pretty good job at drowning out fan noise. However, this laptop isn't quiet by any means, and the fan noise can actually be very, very loud, especially if you're in the turbo mode. Now you can use something like G-Helper to adjust your fan speed and make it a little bit better. But that being said, I don't think you need to spend a lot of time in that turbo profile. I really do think that performance mode is enough for most games, especially with DLSS. But yeah, thank you for watching this video. I am excited to give you more coverage on the G14, and I hope you like this one. I hope you were able to take something away from this video. And with that being said, a like and a sub to the channel is always appreciated. If you've watched all the way through, dropping a laptop emoji in the comments down below lets me know who the real ones are. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you for the support. I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.